Yo, what's popping? The final qualifiers are done. These were to determine the final two teams left. The first game, the London Spitfire against the Toronto Defiant, was to determine if it was going to be London or the Gladiators to get in. If Toronto Defiant did not let London achieve two maps, then it was the Gladiators. However, London ends up not just getting two maps, but three, in a 3-1 victory, and making it over the Gladiators. So, first up was Legion, was a 2 over Toronto. Toronto came out blazing in this one. Hisu was going crazy, and it looked like London weren't going to have a shot, really, because Hisu was just rolling left and right on the Ash. Sparker wasn't able to get the job done. Now, London did win some fights on the first round when they were able to take fights in a position where Toronto wasn't able to have good sightlines for Hisu, like in small rooms and things like that. But other than that, it was mostly Hisu going crazy. And he's so smart. There were times where he would be just waiting in spawn, waiting to regroup, and he would watch up at the high rises for back one to peek his little head over. And as soon as he did, boom, he's dead. Now they're up one, and they can just charge onto the point and win. Hisu is the backbone of this team, not like the player, the strength. And he was performing very well on the first map. On the second map, even better, because London tried to put back one on the Echo, which didn't turn out as well because now, even though Hisu was dead on the first fight originally, London again took a fight in a small room, which normally would be good, but the Echo suddenly can't do as much. And although on the Genji was able to get a lot of value in combination with Hoppa, and they end up winning the fight, and they never let go from there. Back one goes over to the Genji in the end, but it just doesn't matter. Toronto play smart. They don't just go crazy either. They recognize when London was looking to win the fight, they backed out, regrouped, go back in, and only give London a measly 10%. So just smart plays from Hisu overall, and Toronto was playing quite well, and London just weren't able to break it. And in Hollywood, that kind of continues for a bit. It's a 5-4 victory for London, but until Hollywood B, it was all Toronto, you would think. Well, A is a role for London because, no one can hold Hollywood A. But on B, Toronto were playing on the high grounds very well. They weren't able to deal with Hisu on the Ash. The Dynamites were doing very much. Backbone wasn't getting any value. There were some questions because although was getting caught out quite a bit and wasn't able to follow up on Hisu's damage as much as he would have liked, but as a whole, Hisu was able to stop London basically single-handedly in combination with Hoppa doing some good plays, jumping down on them when he had to and things like that. But other than that, it was Hisu mostly. And then Toronto decided, you know what, we're just going to spawn camp. Then there's only like a minute left on the clock. Let's go spawn camp. They spawn camp and it fails miserably. They used ults. London used less ults and break the spawn camp. And suddenly, London snowball that into a map win. I guess I should have said that the Toronto offense came first. And they did a lot of rolling and they ended up finishing with 115. Again, mostly because Hisu played well and the ball came up big whenever Hoppa wasn't able to. But the key thing there was London basically took that troll moment. It was like they had no reason to really do it because it's not like Ash specifically is good in a spawn camp. Maybe even bad, I would argue, because the spawn's right there. You can just, as soon as the dynamite's gone, Ash has way less kill pressure and way less pressure in general. So they could just go in, wait for the dynamite cooldown, and come out. Kind of a misplay from Defiant there. And if they had just continued their spawn hold on B, maybe we wouldn't be having this conversation. Maybe the Gladiators would have been going because London would not have gotten the momentum. A very momentum-based team, it feels like. They rally together quite well when they can. And they end up rolling it, basically. That's the wrap. So then, from there, Hisu kind of disappears because we go to Circle Rail, ends up being a 3-2 for London. And Hisu's on the Sojourn now, so not on the Ash. And Sparker just kind of dominates him in this matchup. He wasn't able to get much going for a while, and although really struggles, to be honest, he does have some moments where he's able to clean up, but that's what a Genji's supposed to do. If a Genji doesn't have at least a moment where he ends up getting a 3 or 4K by cleaning up on damage, he's done a pretty poor job, I think. And he didn't have a great time there. So although it goes really quiet, Backbone steps up. Before this, he had some very questionable blades. He still had some questionable blades on this time where he would blade and there would be no support ults available for Defiant, but he still wouldn't be able to go in and force anything really. But one thing that I will give credit to Backbone for is he never really died in his blades. He either didn't do anything or he did something. So shout out to him because although on the other hand he would just blade and die, and that's an even worse result because now you're also down to your Genji and a blade. You probably lose a fight. If Backbone gets nothing with the blade, they don't necessarily lose the fight. They just don't have that resource to continue it or to have a better odds of winning it. But the biggest story here is Hisu, and although basically disappeared, Backbone and Sparker stepped up, and London ended up winning pretty easily. And after this map, it was like, oh, maybe Defiant were just trolling so that they can now have to play the gladiators in their tournament and things like that. But like realistically, getting this point is better than playing the than not playing the gladiators in the tournament, because you need every point you can get. And it's quite sad that Defiant didn't get it. Now going over to New Queen Street, it ends up being a 112-71 victory for London. Defiant were in a pretty good spot for a lot of this round. Until about like a minute left, it was actually Defiant's lead, but London ended up powering through this because again, although fell up short to start this round, immediately Sparker picked Aldo like 3 fights in a row, just instantly. Aldo was not there, and Defiant had no chance then, really, like unless Hisu goes crazy. But again, Sparker was getting more value than him on the Sojourn. Hisu does come a little bit more alive on New Queen Street here and ends up getting some good picks, ends up shutting down Sparker and picking Admiral a lot. I found he was finding Admiral in opportune times, but in the end, they didn't have a Genji. And Backbone, while he isn't like a fantastic Genji, he's not like a top like 5 Genji in this league or anything like that. But he is at least there, and Aldo was just not there. Aldo was gone. And that's been a problem with Toronto that we've been able to see. This is the only problem you have with Toronto is Aldo maybe isn't good enough to make this team elite. And it kind of showed that this is what happens if Hisu isn't on his game as well. Hisu has to be better than the other Hitscan because Aldo's not going to be better than the other Genji. Basically, what it comes down to. And London ended up winning. They take the back, and they in that 1 minute they went from 71 to 112. And it looked like they were going to complete the map at times. But it was good macro play from Defiant. I like what the core was doing. I think the core did play better, but it just came down to the DPS got out mechanicked, and London took advantage of it and won. So my player of the match is going to be Sparker. Kind of has to be, even though he was stiffed by Hisu on the Ashe in the Sojourn duel. It was all Sparker, and he just soloed this game. Like he was very close to a deadlift on Circuit Royale for sure, and he was just getting opponents left and right. And it felt like half of his picks were on Aldo because like he literally had all those numbers the entire time. So overall, Toronto were dominant at the start, and London looked like they didn't have a chance in hell of even taking a map after Lijiang and up until B. And it seemed like London really had no answer to Hisu on the Ashe. But Toronto got a little sloppy on that spawn camp. London took the momentum and ran. And if the Defiant DPS show up a little bit more, if Hisu doesn't get his dipped as hard by Sparker, Gladiators are in this tournament. But it was not to be. And London ends up winning. But going on to the Florida Mayhem against New York Excelsior. This ends up being a 3-0 for Florida. So off the rip was a little shaky. It looked about even. But it was basically New York. This whole game, it was New York had to be better than Florida. Like their DPS, Yaki and Flora specifically, had to be better than Florida's DPS and carry. Because that's how New York gets any of their wins, any of their close matches. It didn't happen this time, and that's just the New York coin flip. It's not even a coin flip; it's like a dice roll. They have a 1 out of 6 chance. Like it's that bad. So New York do a good job, and they come off the gates blazing. But Florida figure out what they're doing. They are able to secure the point and also not use all their ultimates, which lets them have an advantage and win the round, which is actually a pretty consistent thing. Not only were Florida more proficient in the neutral fights, but they also had a much better understanding of their ultimate usage for the most part. On Gardens, New York do win that 100-0 because they just slowly take the high ground away from Florida, who do get there a little bit first because of the TP. So they get there slightly first, but New York do a great job of slowly taking him away from the high ground and just going to the point and capturing it. And they don't let the Florida DPS get any angles, get in at all, which makes their DPS better and they win. So New York DPS do more and they win, which is shocking, I know. Anyway, City Center, an important thing about City Center, which was 194 for Florida, was Hydron comes in on the Tracer. No one's really seen a lot of Tracer, especially not off the rip. And this actually works out because Flora's on the Ashe. What this means is that whenever you see a Tracer is going to drain resources as the fight goes on. So you want to end these fights quick. It's kind of like Pharah in a way. But New York, they don't recognize that. They keep Flora on the Ashe until well over like 160% total. And that means that they can't really move as fast because they need to hit those dynamites and Flora can't get in position as fast. And if they leave Flora alone, he'll just die to Hydron. So they basically suffer through that for a bit, and then they finally realize, oh, we should put Flora on Sojourn. But at that point, Florida already are in a better position to end up winning the round through ultimates and things. So Florida do. Someone has a huge rampage, and New York go packing. So that was an example of the tracer actually working, but better teams would probably recognize that earlier and wouldn't let the tracer take advantage of them like they did here. So it's give and take, but it was at least different. And for a team like New York, it's perfect. Going over to Paraiso is a 3-2 for Florida. On the offense, Florida's on the Ash. And basically, it was kind of a weird round because both teams had a pretty good time getting into C. But the difference maker here being Florida was able to stop them because, well, Florida, okay, time out. Neither of these teams capped the full thing. I gotta realign my thoughts real quick. And a huge problem for Florida here was Sherman Jed was being over aggressive and did basically nothing. He would see Flora on the high ground on B, for example. He would run at Flora, boop him off, and it's like, okay, but what's that actually doing? In 2 seconds, he'll go up with a coach gun, and now you've just died. So you've traded 2 seconds of Flora off the high ground for your life, which is obviously not worth it as a Lucio at all. But New York are able to stabilize on C. It's pretty hard point to attack. All the points are hard to attack on Paraiso, but whatever. And they're able to hold Florida. Now, New York have an even better time going to A and B, and they have like 5 minutes on C, but critically, Hydron's able to prevent New York from actually winning this out. And not just Hydron, because it's also the ult usage from Florida, because Hydron getting picks means Florida have to use less ults to actually win the fights, which gives them an ult advantage. And it felt like the entire time New York was trying to get that ult advantage back in any way they could, but it just wasn't happening because Florida didn't need to use their ults. So Florida ended up winning with their ultimate advantage in the end. And that's it. New York are down 2-0. Then we go to Junkertown. Both of these teams go through A and B. Not even real. It was just a C versus C, 5 minutes on the point. 5 minutes on the clock. And again, Florida doesn't actually fully cap. New York hold them for... Or no, that's a lie. That's a lie. Florida do fully cap, I remember, with the Nano Blade. Because they were playing double flex support. And it actually worked out really well through A, through B. And on C, it took a bit of time because it's much easier to displace them off the high ground on C with Yaki. But they are able to get it through with the Nano Blade. Again, it's the ultimate usage coming clutch for Florida. Not as much Hydron this time causing it, but it was there. And then on New York's offense, Florida are again playing the double flex support, but New York do a very good job of pathing around it, getting to them as soon as they can, taking as little poke as they can, and they run them down through A and through B, and suddenly you're on C. But now, Florida are back off of their double flex support because it wasn't really working for them. New York were exploiting it too well. And Florida basically win. Like, there was a time where they looked like they were going to have a bit of a struggle there. And I was a bit worried because they used a lot of ults for a single fight. But New York were lucky enough or gracious enough to also use ults back. So Florida, once again, maintained the advantage. Checkmate's able to get big kills. And Florida secured their spot in the tournament. So neither of these teams fully capping anything. But Florida definitely looked like a better team at a macro understanding. And New York couldn't out-mechanic them. If New York can't out-mechanic them, they will lose. So Thompson played the match. I'm going to go to Hydron just because I'm trying to see how I couldn't give it to Hydron because he didn't have that great of a Junkertown, but he was still better than Flora overall. And he was critically important in Oasis and in Circuit Rail, or not Circuit Rail, Paraiso specifically. That I think it has to be them. That Tracer pick, and once again, draining those resources and having New York be that kind of team that doesn't really think on the fly was very good for them and able to maintain the ultimate hold on Paraiso. So, yeah, we already talked about it throughout the review, and that's going to be it for me. So, like this video if you like it, subscribe for more daily Overwatch League content. Thank you so much for watching. Have yourself a good one. Deuces.